25 years together. A family that anyone looking in from the outside would admire. A husband completely devoted to his wife and children. Children who grew up in a home that seemed unbreakable. But then, because of a secret relationship that began with a few careless, hidden messages, she risked everything. And when the truth came to light, it wasn't just the marriage that collapsed. Her own children turned their backs on her as well. This is a story about betrayal. And the devastating price paid after 25 years of marriage. 25 years. That's not just a number. It's an entire lifetime. She met her husband when they were very young, back in a time when everything felt simpler. Love, dreams, and the way they looked at the future. They didn't have much money, no guarantees, but they had each other. And back then, that was enough. They started from nothing. A small apartment, worn-out furniture, simple dinners of pasta with store-bought sauce. Weekends weren't about luxury trips, just grocery shopping together, watching movies on an old TV, or lying on the couch talking about the future. They once talked about having a home of their own, a small garden, 2 children, a stable life, and over time, all of it slowly became reality. 25 years later, they lived in a spacious suburban home, the kind many Americans dream of. 2 stories, a 2-car garage, a neatly trimmed front lawn, and a small white mailbox at the end of the driveway. They had 2 children, a boy and a girl, both grown. The older one was in college, the younger was a senior in high school. Their life wasn't perfect in a movie-like way. There were no daily romantic gestures, no surprise bouquets of roses or spontaneous vacations. But it was stable. Very stable. The husband was the kind of man everyone respected. He wasn't very talkative, not particularly romantic, not someone who expressed his emotions easily, but he was always there, always going to work on time, always paying the bills, always fixing what was broken around the house, always driving the kids to school, to practice, to games. He was the kind of man that when something went wrong, everyone knew. He'll take care of it. And she, the woman of the family, was the emotional center of the home. She took care of the children. She remembered every important occasion. Birthdays, graduations, parent-teacher meetings. She decorated the house for Christmas, prepared Thanksgiving dinner, and was the one who kept everything in the family connected. From the outside, they were the perfect family. Neighbors knew them. Friends admired them. Some even said, "I wish my marriage looked like theirs." They didn't argue much, not because they didn't have problems, but because they had grown used to not talking about them. Small differences were brushed aside. Uncomfortable feelings were swallowed. Distance began to grow, quietly, subtly, so much so that no one really noticed. She started to feel like her husband was becoming more distant. Not that he had changed suddenly, just that he had become quieter. Their conversations gradually became more practical. "Did you pay the electricity bill yet? What time is our kids' game this weekend? I'm going to be late tonight." There were no longer questions like, "How are you feeling today? Are you okay? Are you happy?" But she didn't ask him those questions either. She thought that was normal. After 25 years, who still says things like that? As time went on, they still lived together, ate together, slept in the same bed, but they were no longer truly connected the way they once were. They had become like 2 teammates, completely used to their roles. He handled the finances. She took care of the family. Everything ran smoothly, like a machine that had already been programmed. No mistakes, no disruptions, no surprises. In the evenings after dinner, they would usually sit in the living room. He watched the news. She scrolled through her phone. Occasionally, they exchanged a few words. But most of the time, it was quiet, not an uncomfortable silence, but a familiar kind of silence. So familiar that neither of them thought it was a problem. During the holidays, they still did everything the same way. At Christmas, she decorated the tree. He helped hang the lights outside. On Thanksgiving, the whole family gathered around the big dining table. The kids laughed, sharing stories about school. They took pictures together, posted them on social media. A perfect family, at least in other people's eyes. But there was something no one could see, no one knew. Even she, for a long time, didn't realize it. It was an absence. Not a lack of money. Not a lack of responsibility. Not a lack of presence. But a lack of emotion. A lack of real connection between 2 people who once loved each other deeply. Some nights, lying next to her husband, she felt a strange kind of distance. He was still there, right beside her, and yet so far away. She never said it out loud. She thought maybe everyone feels this way after being married for so long. Maybe this is just the reality of marriage. And then, one day, something very small happened. It wasn't a major incident, not an argument, not an obvious betrayal, just a moment that made her start looking back at everything. That was when she realized she couldn't remember the last time they truly talked to each other. Not about the kids, not about work, not about things that needed to get done, about themselves, about their feelings, their thoughts, the things they had been quietly holding inside. She began to wonder, are we still husband and wife, or just two people living under the same roof? From the outside, no one could see it. They were still the perfect family. A marriage that had lasted 25 years, a responsible husband, a devoted wife, well-behaved children, a stable life, no drama, no scandal, no signs of falling apart. And because of that, no one ever thought a family like theirs could collapse. No one, not even her, until things began to change. There's something no one tells you about long-term marriage. It's not the big fights that break everything apart. It's not the major mistakes that mark the beginning of the end. Sometimes it's the days that are too peaceful. The years that followed passed by steadily, almost without change. In the mornings, she woke up earlier than her husband, made coffee, prepared a simple breakfast, listened to the soft hum of the news playing on the kitchen TV. He came downstairs just like every other day. Morning, morning, a small smile, a nod, nothing wrong, but nothing special either. They ate breakfast together, but each stayed in their own world. He read work emails on his phone. She checked her schedule for the day. Their life ran so smoothly that they didn't need to say much. At first, she didn't see it as a problem. In fact, she thought she was lucky. No arguments. No tension. No sleepless nights filled with anger. Just peace. But over time, she began to notice a feeling she couldn't quite name. Something was slowly fading away. She started noticing the little things. Her husband's messages had become nothing more than, "I'll be home late. Pick up the kid at 5. Don't forget to pay the bill." No more texts like, "I miss you. How was your day? I saw this and thought of you." Evenings felt the same. They still had dinner together, sat at the same table, shared the same space, but they no longer shared emotions. He talked about work, brief to the point. She talked about her day, the same, brief and practical. And then, silence. Sometimes she tried to start a deeper conversation. "Do you remember when we first got married?" He looked up, thought for a few seconds. "Yeah, that was a long time ago." Then he went back to his phone. The conversation ended before it ever really began. She didn't blame him. Honestly, she knew her husband wasn't a bad man. He had never cheated on her, never done anything to make her doubt him. He was still the same responsible man he had always been. Still went to work, still provided for the family, still came home every night, but there was one thing he no longer did. He no longer connected with her. And that was what made her feel empty. Not because he had done something wrong, but because he did nothing at all. Over time, that feeling kept growing. She began to think back to their early days, the long messages, the phone calls that lasted for hours, the way they could look at each other and just know what the other was thinking. Back then, all it took was for him to hold her hand, and she felt like the happiest woman in the world. And now, they could sit next to each other for hours without touching. No hand-holding, no hugs. Sometimes they didn't even look into each other's eyes. One time, she happened to notice a young couple at a coffee shop. They sat across from each other, laughing, talking, reaching for each other's hands. The way they looked at each other was full of attention. She watched them longer than she normally would. Not because she was jealous, but because she realized she once had that. And now, it was gone. That night when she got home, she stood in front of the mirror for a long time. She looked at herself. She was still her, the woman who had lived through 25 years of marriage, still taking care of the family, still keeping everything steady. But in her eyes, something had changed. A little exhaustion, a little emptiness, a quiet sense of something missing. She began to ask herself, what am I lacking? Not money, not security, not responsibility, but a feeling. The feeling of being cared for. The feeling of being heard. The feeling that she still mattered in the eyes of the man beside her. And then, something very natural happened. She started paying more attention to how others treated her. A small compliment from a coworker. A glance that lingered a little longer than usual from a stranger. A simple question like, "Are you okay?" Things she used to overlook now made her think. Not because she wanted to betray anyone, but because she was lacking something. One afternoon while at the grocery store, a man she didn't know smiled at her. Just a polite smile. Nothing special. But she suddenly realized it had been a long time since anyone had looked at her like that. Not as a mother, not as a wife, but as a woman. She got back to her car and sat there for a moment before driving away. A strange feeling crept in. Not guilt, not happiness, but awareness. That night, her husband came home like he always did. I'm home. They had dinner, watched TV, then went to bed. Nothing was different. But inside her, something had shifted. She began to face a truth she had long avoided. Their marriage wasn't falling apart because of a lack of responsibility. It was slowly cracking because of a lack of emotion. But the scariest part was, neither of them realized it soon enough. Or maybe they did, but chose to stay silent. And that silence was the most dangerous thing of all. Not the loud arguments, not the heated fights, but the moment when two people no longer have anything they want to say to each other. She started sharing less, not because she had nothing to say, but because she felt saying it wouldn't change anything. He did the same. More and more, he disappeared into his work, into his phone, into things that had nothing to do with her. They didn't hate each other, but they no longer truly loved each other the way they once had. And that was the most dangerous part. One night, lying in bed, she turned to look at her husband. He was already asleep, his breathing steady, his face peaceful. She looked at him for a long time. This was the man who had been by her side for more than half her life, the father of her children, the one who had built everything she had today with her. And yet, he felt like a stranger. A tear rolled down her cheek, not from pain, but from emptiness. She turned to face the wall, and in her mind, a thought echoed, one she had never dared to admit. Is this all I'm going to have for the rest of my life? She didn't have an answer, but deep down she knew one thing. If everything kept going like this, one day, something would change. And when it did, it might already be too late to turn back. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing in a relationship is not when two people hate each other. It's when they've grown too used to being silent together. No one steps into an affair thinking, I'm going to destroy everything. At least, not in the beginning. She met him on a very ordinary afternoon. There was no romantic soundtrack, no destined movie-like eye contact, just a random moment, like hundreds of others she had experienced in her life. That day, she got to the gym earlier than usual. The air was cool, the faint smell of rubber from the equipment lingered, and soft music played through the speakers. A few people were already there, familiar faces she often saw but rarely spoke to. She stepped onto a treadmill, and that was when she heard a voice behind her. Are you done with this one? She turned around. He was standing there, tall, well put together, carrying the calm confidence of someone who had lived a full life. Not too young, but enough to feel refreshing. Not yet. Give me 5 minutes, she replied. He nodded and smiled. Take your time. That was it. A simple sentence. A polite smile. But for some reason, she remembered it. In the days that followed, they started seeing each other more often. Not intentionally. They just happened to work out at the same time. At first, it was just short greetings. Hi. Hey. Busy today? The conversations weren't anything special, but they were easy. Unlike the conversations at home, short, practical, and sometimes heavy. Here, everything felt lighter. Gradually, they started talking more about work, about the weather, about the little things in life. He knew how to listen. He didn't interrupt. He didn't rush to give advice. He simply listened. And that made her feel noticed. One day he asked, Do you always come here alone? She gave a small smile. Yeah, my husband doesn't like the gym. He nodded. He's missing out on a lot. It wasn't an obvious kind of comment, but it lingered in her mind longer than it should have. She started paying more attention to her appearance, choosing her workout outfits more carefully, putting on a little makeup, just enough to look fresh, not because she was trying to impress anyone. At least, that's what she told herself. One evening, as she was about to leave the gym, he walked up to her. Do you use Instagram? She hesitated for a second, then nodded. They exchanged accounts. That was it. A small step. But sometimes it's the smallest steps that lead to the biggest changes. That night, lying in bed, she picked up her phone. A new notification. A message from him. Nice meeting you today. She stared at the screen for a moment, then replied, That's how it started. At first, they only texted in the evenings. Simple conversations. Today was exhausting. I needed that workout. Hope you had a good day. Nothing crossed the line. Nothing she couldn't explain if someone asked. But over time, the messages became longer, more personal, more real. He started asking about her life. Not just, how was your day, but are you happy? Do you feel like you're living the life you want? Questions that no one had asked her in a very long time. At first, she answered safely. Yeah, everything's good, just busy with family and stuff. But then, she began to be more honest, little by little. She told him about her marriage. Not in a negative way, just truthfully. We're fine. There's nothing seriously wrong. It's just, sometimes it feels a little distant. He didn't judge. He didn't give advice. He simply said, That must be hard. Just that one sentence was enough to make her feel understood. Slowly, she began to look forward to his messages. In the morning, she checked her phone as soon as she woke up. At night, she waited to see if he would text. That feeling, she hadn't experienced it in a long time. One time, he texted, "I like talking to you." She read that line over and over again. Her heart beat a little faster. She knew this was going further than it should. She knew this was a boundary, a line that once crossed wouldn't be easy to come back from. But she didn't stop. They started texting all day, not just in the evenings, while she was at the grocery store, while she was waiting to pick up her kids, even while sitting next to her husband on the couch. She found herself smiling more when looking at her phone, and talking less when she was with her husband. One evening her husband asked, "Something funny?" She looked up, a little startled. "No, just a video," he nodded. Didn't ask anything else. And somehow that lack of questioning made her feel relieved. And continue. One day he suggested, "Do you want to grab coffee sometime? Not at the gym, somewhere else." She stared at the message for a long time. This was different. No longer running into each other, but intentional. She knew this was wrong. She knew it clearly. And yet she replied, "Sure." Their first meeting was nothing special. A small coffee shop. Two people sitting across from each other. They talked. They laughed. Their eyes lingered a little longer than usual. Nothing happened. No touching, no lines crossed. But as she drove home, she knew everything had changed. After that, they started seeing each other more often. Not always at a cafe. Sometimes they went for a walk. Sometimes they had lunch together. The distance between them slowly disappeared. One time, as they stood a little closer than usual, he gently touched her hand. Just a light touch, but enough to make her heart race. She didn't pull away. That was the moment the boundary was broken. After that, everything moved faster, more naturally, more dangerously. The touches became more frequent, the looks became more obvious. Until one day, they didn't stop anymore. She knew exactly what she was doing. It wasn't accidental, it wasn't forced, it was a choice. A wrong choice. But she kept going. Every time she came home, she told herself, this is the last time. But then, the next day, she would text him again, see him again. Continue. She was living two lives, a perfect wife and a woman with a secret. And the scariest part was, she was starting to get used to it. She knew she was doing something wrong. She knew it clearly. No one had to tell her. But she kept going. Because for the first time in so many years, she felt alive. And sometimes that feeling is stronger than reason, stronger than right and wrong. But what she didn't realize was, with every step she took further, she was getting closer to something she couldn't control. And when everything finally fell apart, there would be no turning back. At first, she thought she could control everything. She really did. She believed she was mature enough, rational enough to keep things within limits, that this was just a small, offbeat moment in an otherwise steady, predictable life. No one had to know. No one would get hurt, and eventually, it would just end on its own. But life doesn't work that way, especially when emotions start getting involved. During the day, she was still the same person she had always been, a caring mother, a reliable wife, a woman everyone looked at and thought, she has it all. She woke up early, prepared breakfast, reminded the kids about their schedules, their exams, asked her husband about his plans for the day. Everything still ran perfectly. But somewhere, in between those ordinary moments, there was another life, a part of her that no one knew about. Her phone became the most important thing, not because of work, but because of him. She always kept it on silent, but on vibrate, always placed it face down when she was near her husband, always carried it with her, even when she was just walking from the living room to the kitchen. Every message from him made her heart beat faster, not because the words were extraordinary, but because of the feeling of being anticipated, being noticed, being a woman, not just a role. Miss you. Just 2 words, but enough to make her smile while sitting next to her family. She started dividing her time, not clearly, not intentionally, but emotionally. Mornings, family, afternoons, work, kids, evenings, family, and the small gaps in between were for him. A quick text in the parking lot, a short call while running errands, a coincidental meet-up in the middle of the day. Everything was carefully arranged. At least, she thought so. She still cooked for her husband, still asked about his work, still sat next to him watching TV every night. Sometimes she even tried harder than before, smiled more, started conversations more often, as if to make up for something. But there was one thing she didn't realize. That effort didn't come from love. It came from guilt. And guilt can't last forever. She started lying. At first it was just small things. I'm gonna meet a friend for a bit. I have to stay out a little longer today. I need to run out for something. Her husband didn't suspect anything. He trusted her. Completely. And that trust made it easier for her to keep going. One time, while she was texting, her husband walked into the room. She immediately locked her screen. He looked at her, a little surprised. "What are you doing?" "Nothing. Just checking emails." He nodded. "Okay." He didn't ask anything else. She let out a quiet breath of relief. But deep down, there was a slight ache. That night, lying in bed, she turned her back to her husband, phone in her hand, a message from him. "Wish I was there with you." She stared at those words, then glanced at the man lying beside her. Two worlds, existing at the same time. She knew she was walking on a very thin line. One small mistake and everything would fall apart. But that sense of danger was exactly what made it more intoxicating. Every time they met, her heart raced. Not just because of him, but because of the fear. The fear of being caught, of being seen, of losing everything. And at the same time, it was the most alive she had felt in a long time. She started telling herself the same familiar things. "I still love my family. I don't want to leave my husband. This is just temporary." She believed it, or at least tried to. She still attended parent-teacher meetings, still went out to family dinners on weekends, still took photos and posted them on social media with a perfect smile. No one suspected a thing. No one knew. But behind those pictures was a completely different reality. She began having to remember everything. What she told her husband, what she told him, the stories that had to stay consistent. One time, her husband asked, "Didn't you say you went out with Sarah last week?" She froze for a second, then smiled. "Oh, not last week. Last week was with Lisa." He nodded. "Yeah, maybe I got it mixed up." She turned away, her heart pounding. One small lie needed another to cover it. And then, another. She found herself living inside a web of stories. Each one had to match the others. Every detail had to be remembered. Sometimes she asked herself, what am I even doing? But then, all it took was one message from him, and all those questions disappeared. She became dependent, not completely, but enough that she couldn't easily stop. There were days she told herself, today I'm going to end it. But then, hey, are you free today? And she replies, yes. She knows she's slipping deeper. She knows it clearly, but she doesn't stop. Because the further she goes, the harder it is to turn back. One evening, while the whole family is having dinner, her daughter says, Mom, lately you seem different. She looks up. Different how? I don't know, just distracted. Her husband looks at her, says nothing, but his gaze lingers a little longer than usual. She smiles. Maybe I'm just tired. They keep eating, as if nothing happened. But inside her, a sense of unease starts to grow. She realizes something she had never thought about before. It's not the affair that's the hardest part, it's keeping the secret. And a secret never stands alone. It has to be protected, hidden, fed with lies. And every lie leads to another. She can't even remember where it all began. All she knows is she's very far from where she started. And day by day, she finds it harder to recognize herself. The woman who once believed in family, who believed in loyalty, who thought she would never become that kind of person, now is living two lives at once. And the scariest part is, she keeps going. Because sometimes a secret isn't just a secret. It's a chain of choices, of lies, of moments of weakness. And to keep it alive, she has to keep building more layers to cover it up, until even she can no longer tell what's real. Because one secret always needs more secrets to hide it. No marriage falls apart in a single day, but there are moments when everything built over decades suddenly collapses. At first, he didn't think much of it, just a few small things. The changes were too subtle to put into words, but enough to make him feel like something wasn't right. She started carrying her phone everywhere. Before, she could leave it on the kitchen table, on the couch, even forget it in the bedroom. But now, always in her hand. Or at least, always within sight. Whenever a message came in, she looked down immediately. Quick, almost like a reflex. And every time, her expression shifted, just slightly. Not obvious, but different. He had been with her for over 25 years. He knew every little expression on his wife's face. At first, he told himself, maybe I'm overthinking this. He wasn't the suspicious type. He trusted his wife. He always had. But doubt doesn't need a big reason to begin. Just a feeling. One evening, while they were sitting in the living room, she was texting, her fingers moving quickly across the screen, a faint smile passing over her face. He looked at her. Something funny? She looked up, just for a second, but enough for him to notice. She was startled. No, just a friend. A simple answer. Reasonable, but not convincing. That night, he didn't fall asleep right away. He lay there staring at the ceiling, listening to his wife's steady breathing beside him. A thought crossed his mind. Then he pushed it away. No way. But that thought didn't disappear. In the days that followed, he started paying more attention, not deliberately watching her, just observing. She went out more often, not excessively, but enough to feel different. I'm meeting a friend. I'm going to pick up a few things. I've got something to take care of. All perfectly normal reasons. But the frequency increased. One time he asked, "Who are you going with?" "Sarah." He nodded, but in his mind there was a gap. He couldn't remember the last time she had even mentioned Sarah. But he didn't ask any more questions. He didn't want to become that kind of man, the suspicious husband, the controlling husband. But the more he tried not to think about it, the more he did. One morning, while she was in the shower, her phone vibrated on the table. He looked at it. Just a phone. But in that moment, it felt like a door. He could ignore it, turn away, keep trusting her, or open it. He stood there for a few seconds, then a few more. His heart started beating faster. Finally, he picked up the phone. The screen lit up. A new message. Not a name, just a number. But the message, "Last night was amazing." Time seemed to stop. He read it again, once, then twice. There was no way to misunderstand those words. His hand began to tremble. He didn't open anything else. He didn't need to. That one line was enough. He set the phone back down. Slowly, as if any sudden movement might shatter everything instantly. He just stood there, not moving. 25 years. 25 years of a life together. And in a single moment, everything became uncertain. When she walked out of the bathroom, everything looked the same as always. But to him, nothing was normal anymore. He looked at her, longer than usual. She noticed. "What's wrong?" He didn't answer right away. Then he asked, "Do you want to tell me something?" She froze. Just for a second. But this time, he saw it clearly. "What do you mean?" Her voice was still calm. Too calm. He looked straight into her eyes. "I saw the message." The air in the room froze. She said nothing. A long silence stretched between them. "What message?" she asked. He let out a small laugh. Not because anything was funny, but because he couldn't believe it. "Do you really want me to read it out loud?" She looked at him, and in that moment, all her defenses collapsed. He saw it, in her eyes. The truth. No more words were needed. He turned away. "How long has it been?" His voice, she didn't answer right away. "I'm asking you, how long? How while?" "A while is how long? A few months." He closed his eyes, not out of anger, but because it hurt. "Do you love him?" That question caught in her throat. "No." A quick answer. Too quick. He gave a faint, bitter smile. "But you slept with him." She didn't answer. And that silence was the answer. He walked out of the room. She called after him, "Wait," but he didn't stop. He went downstairs to the living room, sat down, both hands on his head. Everything in his mind felt like it was shattering. Memories, moments, years, all crashing in at once. The first time they met, their wedding day, the day their first child was born, family vacations, the nights they got through hard times together. He had trusted her, completely. And now, he didn't know what was real anymore. She stood at the top of the stairs, looking down. The man she had spent more than half her life with was sitting there, alone. And for the first time, she saw him, vulnerable. Not because he was yelling, not because he was angry, but because he was silent. That silence was heavier than any words. She walked down the stairs, slowly. "Hey!" He didn't look up. "I'm sorry." Those two words fell into the empty space between them. Not enough. Could never be enough. He let out a quiet, bitter laugh. "Sorry for what?" She didn't know how to answer. For the betrayal? For the lies? Or for getting caught? "All of it," he nodded. Then finally, he looked up. His eyes weren't the same anymore. The trust was gone. The warmth was gone. All that remained was distance. "I don't understand." His voice was rough. "After everything, why?" She opened her mouth. But no words were enough. She could say she felt lonely, that she was missing a connection, that she just wanted to feel seen. But all of that sounded like excuses. And he knew it. "I'm not perfect," he said. "I know that. But I've always been here." That sentence cut like a knife, because it was true. He had never left, never betrayed her, never done anything to make her doubt him. And she had done all of it. Tears began to fall. "I don't know why I did this." He shook his head. "No, you do." And those words hit the very thing she had been trying to avoid. She knew. Every step, every choice. She knew. She just kept going anyway. A long silence followed. Then he said, "The most painful part isn't that you slept with someone else." She looked at him. "It's that you looked at me every day and still lied to me. Every single day, all that time, she ate with him, slept beside him, talked to him, all while carrying a secret. "I trusted you," he said, his voice breaking. "I trusted you more than anyone." She couldn't look at him anymore, because she knew. The most painful part isn't the betrayal. It's when you realize the person you trusted the most is the one who's been lying to you for a long time. And in that moment, 25 years of marriage no longer feels like a solid foundation. It feels like something that just shattered right in front of you. There were no screams, no dramatic scene like in the movies. Everything unfolded quietly. And that silence made it even heavier. After that confrontation, their home was no longer the same. No one said it out loud, but they both understood. Everything had changed, permanently. In the first few days, they still lived under the same roof, but they were no longer together, just existing in the same space. He moved downstairs to sleep in the living room. No arguments, no explanations, just not wanting to share a room with her anymore. She lay on the familiar bed, but it felt completely foreign. The emptiness beside her wasn't just the absence of a person, but the absence of the connection they once had. They stopped having dinner together. No more family meals, no more everyday conversations. If they needed to talk, it was only about the bare minimum. The kids, schedules, no emotion, no eye contact. Like two strangers, temporarily sharing a house. The kids noticed immediately. No one had to say anything. The atmosphere in the house changed. No more laughter. No more warmth. Her daughter was the first to speak up. One evening, while she was standing in the kitchen, her daughter walked in. "Mom, what's going on?" She turned around. Her chest tightened. "There's nothing, honey." The child looked at her, no longer with the same innocent eyes as before. "Don't lie to me." Those words cut straight through her. Because she knew she had lied too many times already. A few days later, the truth came out, not in the way she had hoped. Not gently, but because it had to. He told the kids, no details, no blame, just the truth. Mom made a mistake, a simple sentence, but enough to break everything. Her son didn't say a word. He just stood up and walked out of the room. Her daughter looked at her, tears falling. Why? Just one word. But she had no answer. No answer would ever be enough. From that day on, everything changed. The kids didn't talk to her the same way anymore. No more sharing. No more stories. They still lived in the house, still ate, still went to school. But to her, they felt like they were in a different world. There were meals where they all sat at the same table, but no one looked her in the eye. No one asked how her day was. And for the first time, she understood what it felt like to be isolated. Not by strangers, but by her own family. Her husband began to change quickly. He was no longer the quiet, familiar man she knew. He became cold, not out of hate, but because he had shut down emotionally. One morning, he placed an envelope on the table. "We need to talk." She looked at the envelope. She didn't even have to open it to know what it was. Divorce papers. Her heart felt like it stopped for a second. "Are you sure?" He looked at her, no hesitation in his eyes. "I can't keep living like this. Not out of anger, not out of revenge. Just an ending." 25 years, she whispered. He nodded. "Yeah, 25 years. A long silence, and you destroyed it." His words weren't loud, but they were enough to make her feel like she couldn't stand. He didn't yell, didn't break anything, and that made it hurt even more, because it meant he wasn't trying to fix it anymore. She signed the papers a few days later, not because she wanted to, but because she had no choice. The house that was once full of memories now felt cold. Every corner reminded her of what she had lost. The couch where they used to sit together, the dining table where the family once laughed, the kitchen where she had cooked thousands of meals. Everything was still there, but the meaning was gone. She began to understand something she had never thought about before. She didn't just lose her husband, she was losing her entire family. The kids grew distant, not because they didn't love her, but because they no longer trusted her. One day she tried to talk to her son. "Did you have dinner yet?" He gave a short answer, yeah. Didn't look at her. Didn't stop. She stood there, not knowing what to say next. Her daughter was the same. No more hugs at night. No more stories about school. Just silence. And this time, the silence no longer felt familiar. It was cold, distant, and it hurt. In the nights that followed, she often sat alone in the living room. No TV on, no music playing. Just sitting, thinking. About everything that had happened. She replayed every step, every decision, every moment when she could have stopped, but didn't. She remembered the first text, the first time they met alone, the first lie. Each time, it was a choice, not a single mistake, but a chain of them. And now, she was living with the consequences of all those choices. That man, he wasn't there anymore. He had no place in her life now, not because he completely disappeared, but because what they had no longer meant anything. The feelings that once felt so intense now felt empty, because the price she paid was too high. She had traded her family for something that, in the end, wasn't even real. One evening, she stood in front of the mirror, looking at herself. No longer the confident woman she used to be, just someone trying to understand who she had become. Tears fell. Not because she lost her husband, but because she realized she had lost herself. She whispered, "What have I done?" But no one answered. Because sometimes the most important questions in life don't have answers, only consequences and lessons. One wrong decision. Just one decision. But it can destroy what took decades to build. At first, she believed she was stepping into something meaningful, not just an affair, not just a passing emotion, but something deeper, a connection she believed she had lost a long time ago. In the beginning, he gave her everything she felt she had been missing. Attention, listening, excitement. He asked her questions no one else did. He looked at her in a way she had forgotten what it felt like. With him, she wasn't a wife of 25 years, not a mother of 2. She was just a woman. And that made her believe it was real. But the truth doesn't always match the feeling. After everything came out, things started to change. Not immediately, not in a dramatic way, but slowly. His messages became less frequent, no longer consistent like before. No more long texts, no more constant attention. Busy today. Talk later. She stared at the screen, waiting for another message, but none came. She told herself, maybe he's just busy. But deep down, she felt something wasn't right. Before, he was always the one initiating, always looking for her, always wanting to see her. But now, she was the one texting first. She was the one waiting. A familiar feeling returned. The feeling of being forgotten. One afternoon she texted, "Do you want to see me?" After a long while he replied, "Maybe some other time." No explanation. No enthusiasm. She read that message over and over again. This was the man who once said he couldn't stop thinking about her, who said she made him feel alive again. And now it was just maybe. She began to realize something. Their relationship only existed in certain moments. When everything was still a secret, when there was still a sense of danger, when nothing had been broken yet. But when reality set in, it wasn't the same anymore. He wasn't the one who had to face a broken family, not the one who had to watch his children grow distant, not the one who had to sign the divorce papers. She was, and when she started needing him more, he slowly began to pull away. One evening, they met. It wasn't like before. No more excitement. No more emotionally charged glances. Just two people, trying to hold on to something that had already changed. "Are you okay?" he asked. She gave a faint smile. "Do you think I am?" He didn't answer. Silence. "I didn't think things would turn out like this," he said. She looked at him. "What did you think it would be like?" He sighed. "I don't know. Just not this complicated." She let out a quiet laugh. But this time it wasn't out of joy. "Not complicated." She repeated it, as if trying to understand. "Do you even know what I've lost?" He stayed silent. "I lost my family." Her voice cracked. "I lost my husband. I lost my children. I lost everything." He looked down. "I didn't tell you to do that." Those words felt like a knife. He was right. He didn't force her. But he didn't stay either. "I don't blame you," she said. And this time she meant it. Because in the end, this was her choice. No one else's. After that night, they saw each other less and less. Not because there was a clear decision, but because there was no reason left to continue. What once connected them was gone. No more secrets. No more thrill. No more escape. Just reality. And reality wasn't enough to keep them together. One day she realized he hadn't texted her all day. The next day, the same. She didn't text first. Not because she didn't want to, but because she understood. It was over. No goodbye. No closure. Just disappearance, and that hurt in a different way. Not loud, not clear, but enough to leave her feeling empty. She sat alone in a house that was once filled with laughter. Now there was only silence. Not the familiar silence from before, but the silence of loss. No husband sitting and watching TV, no children running around, no simple daily conversations. Just her, alone. She walked through each room, the living room, the kitchen, the bedroom, every place filled with memories, but no one left to share them with. She sat down on the couch, staring into nothing, and for the first time she truly understood the cost of her choices. It wasn't just losing a relationship. It was losing an entire life that once existed. She missed her husband, Not in a romantic way, but in the smallest things. The way he always checked the door before going to bed, the way he made coffee every morning, the way he asked, "Are you okay?" Even when she didn't realize how much that question meant. She missed her children, their laughter, the meaningless conversations, the moments she once thought were ordinary. Now, they felt like a luxury. She realized something too late. Everything she had been searching for outside, attention, connection, the feeling of being loved, had actually always existed in her life, just in a different way. Not loud, not intense, but steady. She had a man by her side for 25 years, a man who never left her, a man who loved her in the most consistent way. And she failed to see it, until it was gone. One evening, she stood by the window, looking outside. The city was still the same. Life went on. Only she had changed. She whispered, "If only." But those words never change anything, because time doesn't go backward. What's done is done. She couldn't go back to the first message she received. She couldn't go back to the moment she said yes to that first meeting. She couldn't go back and choose a different path. All she had was the present, and the present was the consequence of the past. She sat down. Tears fell. There was no one left to comfort her, no one left to talk to, just herself, with her own thoughts. And in that silence, a truth became clearer than ever. She traded a 25-year family, only to realize that everything she had been searching for had been right beside her all along. After everything, this story isn't just about a broken marriage. It's also a very real question about how people face their pain and the choices they make. In Western culture, especially in the United States, people tend to value both family and individuality. So when a long-term marriage falls apart because of infidelity, the question isn't just, can it be saved, but also, would saving it truly be good for both people? Some choose to stay, to try to rebuild, because of the years they've shared, because of their children, because they believe love can be rebuilt from broken pieces. But others choose to walk away, because they believe that once trust is broken, it's nearly impossible to restore it to what it once was. If you were in the husband's position, what would you do? Would you forgive and give the marriage another chance? Or would you walk away, hold on to your self-respect, and start a new life? Share your thoughts in the comments.